Welcome back to Lazy History Club, where we specialize in the forgotten, the ridiculous, and the weirdly fragrant. Today's story: a national crisis, a moral panic, and a bulb. No, not a light bulb. This was 1766. This was Sweden. This was onions. That year, across rural parishes and bustling towns, a strange belief took root: that eating raw onions could make you invisible to divine judgment. Sin all you like. As long as you had an onion in your mouth, God apparently couldn't see you. A loophole so pungent, it nearly brought parts of Sweden to a tearful, breathy standstill. Grab a mint. Let's peel back the layers. It began in whispers. A sermon misheard. A travelling preacher with questionable theology. No one's quite sure who lit the match. But soon it was said in taverns and churches alike. Onions warded off not just bad spirits, but bad judgment. People began biting into onions before prayer. Some claimed their sins felt lighter. One man, a cobbler named Erland, swore that after eating 2 red onions and confessing absolutely nothing, he slept peacefully for the first time in a decade. Word spread faster than good hygiene in an 18th century city. By midsummer, the markets in Uppsala had sold out of allium. Clergymen began to notice their congregations weren't just arriving to worship, they were arriving with snacks. And not discreet ones. Imagine trying to deliver a homily on humility while half your pews are chewing furiously and sobbing, not from guilt, but from sulfur compounds. One bishop described it in a letter as a revival, except it smells like a soup pot exploded in a confessional. By fall, the belief was so widespread that it wasn't just tolerated, it was expected. Arriving at court without a bite of onion was considered spiritually reckless. Children tucked cloves into their pockets like talismans. And one particularly anxious noble was said to have lined his undergarments with pickled shallots, just in case. As the fad grew, the clergy began to panic. Not all priests were on board. Some tried to ban onions from church outright. But enforcing that proved tricky. One priest in rural Jämtland demanded all onions be thrown out before entering Mass. The villagers complied by burying them outside the church door, planting what became an impromptu field of repentance. Months later, green shoots sprouted as if the earth itself were chewing. Another parish saw open revolt. A young curate attempted to confiscate an onion from a particularly devout widow. She struck him with a hymnal and shouted, "I'll see you judged before God, but not before I'm done with my breakfast." Others took a more theological approach. Sermons warned that God could, in fact, smell onions and was not impressed. One monk attempted to prove this by placing a raw onion on the altar and waiting for lightning. None came. The congregation declared the onion blessed. At the highest levels, the Swedish church debated whether this was heresy, hysteria, or simply indigestion mistaken for divine inspiration. No conclusion was reached. Mostly because no one could stand to stay in the same room long enough. If the clergy couldn't stop it, maybe the courts could. That was the hope anyway. The first case arrived in autumn. A merchant accused of cheating his customers by watering down wine. When questioned, he calmly pulled out a red onion, took a dramatic bite, and declared, "God sees nothing. You can't either." The judge blinked, tried to continue, but was soon overwhelmed by the smell. The trial was adjourned. Over the next 2 months, more cases fell apart. One man refused to remove an onion from his mouth while testifying. A woman on trial for slander declared she couldn't be cross-examined while divinely obscured. When ordered to speak clearly, she ate a second onion instead. Lawyers began to carry vinegar just to mask the courtroom stench. Court scribes had to rewrite documents because their eyes watered too much to write legibly. Eventually, a frustrated magistrate issued a brief but bold ruling. Henceforth, the court shall not recognize vegetables as legal protections. It didn't help. The next day, someone brought a turnip instead, just to test the limits. By the start of winter, Sweden's government could no longer ignore the onion in the room. Reports of mass public crying. Diplomatic meetings cancelled due to breath-related concerns. An ambassador from Denmark reportedly fainted after sharing a carriage with a bishop carrying a particularly sharp shallot in his cassock. In Stockholm, officials met to draft a royal response. One proposed labelling onions as medicinal, which would ban them from churches. Another proposed taxing raw onion purchases. A third suggested outlawing all spiritual interpretations of produce. Ultimately, the Crown issued a decree. Onions may be consumed for health or culinary reasons, but any claims of divine invisibility would be considered grounds for spiritual fraud. No one quite knew what that meant, but the public took the hint. The more respectable parishes began quietly discouraging onion chewing. Markets added disclaimers to their produce stalls, no promises of holiness. And by spring, the fervour had died down, though some diehards continued to sneak a nibble during especially awkward confessions. And so ended the Great Onion Crisis of 1766, a spiritual loophole, a social experiment, and a powerful lesson in the hazards of trying to outsmart God with salad ingredients. Did it work? Probably not. But it gave people comfort and a very strong scent in uncertain times. So, next time someone tells you history is dry, remind them, Sweden once believed you could escape divine judgment with a bite of raw onion. And somewhere, even now, there's probably a nervous soul with a shallot in their sock. Just in case. Stay lazy, stay curious, and keep your vegetables in the kitchen, not the courtroom. The end.